All right, Shalom. All praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahushua, by Hashem, Rakak, Wadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and salutation to the elect. This is basically just going to be a quick excerpt. I'll probably cover a paragraph or two going into the invention of race in the European Middle Ages. And this is basically just a continuation of the previous video I did about how race really hasn't changed, and it's basically a disease in which Esau, the so-called white man, has created or clearly invented, just as he invented witchcraft and sorcery and spells and all of the other programs in which people are beguiled by. Okay, so I'm gonna start here at the, let's just jump to page 182, I think, or 183, chapter 4. Okay, it says 4, color, epidermal race, phantasmic race, blackness, and Africa in the racial sensorium. Okay, and you guys can read this. I'll leave the link to this book in the description box, but I'll just read these next couple pages. It says, studies on pre-modern race have often focused on color as the paramount index of race, so that attitudes towards blackness are sought as the deciding factor, adjudicating whether racial behavior and phenomena existed in antiquity and the Middle Ages. To complicate our views on medieval race, I have thus far emphasized multiple locations of race over a singular epidermal focus, fanning out attention to how religion, the state, economic interests, colonization, war, and international contests for hegemony, among other determinants, have materialized race and have configured racial attitudes, behavior, and phenomenon across the centuries. But attention to color and physiognomy, characterized in tandem with color, are now the focus of this chapter. At the heart of scholarly interest in color, I have argued in articles over the years, and in chapter 1 above, has lurked a spectacular enigma in the field of vision: the ascension of whiteness to supremacy as a category of identity in the definition of the Christian European subject. Okay, say see Hing or Hing, Jews, Invention 1, Invention 2. Classicus James D., Puzzling the Enigma of Color, has a vignette that tellingly gets to the point of color as race. In my classroom teaching days, I used to hold up a blank sheet of paper and say, now this is undoubtedly white. Then put my other hand in front of it and add, but if you also want to call this white, there's some serious semantic distortion going on that might be hard to explain to a visitor from outer space. So I'm going to take a pause real quick right here and just kind of, I guess, expound on this scenario of how Esau, the so-called white man, okay, can basically, through his language, okay, his recently created language, the English language, can deem anything whatever he wants it to be, because he has the power in his hand. Okay, this is Micah chapter 2 verse 1. Woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds. When the morning is light, they practice it, because it is in the power of their hand. And that's exactly what Esau, the so-called white man, does, man. He has the power in his hand to create any type of thought process to have anyone believe it. Just like telling you that he's white when he's really red. Okay? Let's continue. It says the range of hues visible in Caucasian flesh tones, cream, pink, beige, and E.M. Forster's famous compound, pinko gray, is only the starting point for D's question. Did the Greeks and Romans think themselves as white people or as part of a white race? Surveying a host of documents attesting that virile, admired heroes in the Greco-Roman world, like the Greek Odysseus, are depicted as dark-skinned, while women, sickly people, pasty-faced philosophers, and cowards are deprecated as pale. D finds that the concept of a distinct white race was not present in the ancient world. This is Micah chapter 6 verse 12. For the rich men thereof are full of violence, and the inhabitants thereof have spoken lies, and their tongue is deceitful in their mouth. That's exactly why Esau, the so-called white man, will not tell you, okay, that in ancient times, in medieval times, the Greeks, the Romans, their own quote-unquote people, did not consider themselves white. Okay? They did not consider themselves as being a white race of people. All right? Let's continue. Greco-Roman antiquity, revered and embraced by the Middle Ages as its superior in civilization and knowledge, and possessed of supreme cultural authority, did not enshrine whiteness of skin as an admirable let alone a defining characteristic central to the authority of group identity, D finds. I'm gonna read that again. Greco-Roman antiquity, revered and embraced by the Middle Ages as its superior in civilization and knowledge, and possessed of supreme cultural authority, did not enshrine whiteness of skin as an admirable, let alone a defining characteristic central to the authority of group identity, D finds. In the Mediterranean, where races, people, and dermal pigments intermixed for millennia, this is Esau going off. This is not perhaps so startling a conclusion, but Madeline Cavendish takes up the puzzle of when humans in Western Europe began to see their own flesh tones as identical to whiteness. In a remarkable article with 59 full-color images, Cavendish stresses the significant departure from traditions of antiquity that innovation of this kind entail, especially for the visual arts. The visual arts are especially important, she asserts, because they do ideological work more powerfully than text, because we privilege sight over our other senses. And also, perhaps, though Cavendish does not say this explicitly, because of visual arts' beguiling sense of immediacy and intimacy, the impression visuality imparts of being more readily and easily accessed without meditation than literal texts, which have to be read word by word and then painstakingly interpreted. So clearly, this whole paragraph here is going into iconoclasm, okay? And that iconoclasm, okay, is where you get situations such as this, okay? Caesar Borgia, or Serapis Christus. Okay? Because we know that the Messiah, Hamashiach, Yahushai, oh, there's the one, okay, is a so-called Negro. Okay? Skin like bronze and hair like wool. That's all we're saying. Okay? And really, this goes to show you why they started using the arts, painting specifically, okay, as a means of covering up the faces of the judges thereof. Okay? Let's continue. It says, oh, and also they didn't want people to read more. They wanted people just to be entertained, because that's what art is. Art is a vague interpretation of what the quote unquote artist is depicting. Whereas reading, okay, actually involves discernment. It involves vocabulary. It involves calculation. Okay? So all of this was a creation or an invention, okay, by so-called white people to associate themselves with the color white. Okay? It says a picture, it seems to people, not only conveys more than 1,000 words, but also offers less hindrance to immediate absorption and understanding. Not least of all, in the Middle Ages, visual art can be seen by 1,000 times more people. Okay? So now the understanding, now the programming, now the sorcery, now the witchcraft is spreading at a cancerous or disease or infectious rate, to where those that are studied, those that are scholarly, okay, those that are learned are now in the minority, because everyone else has seen an image in which they've embraced without any type of filter or thought process. I'm gonna read that again. A picture, it seems to people, not only conveys more than 1,000 words, but also offers less hindrance to immediate absorption and understanding. Not least of all, in the Middle Ages, visual art can be seen by 1,000 times more people, while literacy is confined to a tiny percent of elites. Statues, stained glass, and frescoes literally reach multitudes. A shift in thinking about the skin of Europeans, Calvinists finds, occurred in the Latin West in the second half of the 13th century. In this, we should allow her the courtesy of recognizing the likelihood of uneven development, as innovations occurred earlier in some regions and later in others, or were ignored in yet other regions. So basically, this change was occurring where so-called white people were basically flooding the visual minds of people with images that related to them as being white, and in some regions they were underdeveloped, just like third world countries, and they didn't even know the difference. Okay, let me see here. I think I'm gonna read one more paragraph. Hold on, Salak. Let's try this. Oh man, well, I thought I read it a second ago. So anyway, let me see here. Okay, so I'm gonna pick up here in page 183. You know, Esau tried to hinder, but through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai, I was able to get the pages that I need. In a tradition that stemmed from antiquity, Byzantine and early medieval painters applied heavy layers of pigment to faces and bodies, working up the relief contours to pinkish highlights. Typically, only the whites of the eyes are pure white. Early 12th century European works that have little to do with Byzantine style, such as the great Catalan wall paintings or famous service book from Limoges in France also depict rich flesh tones dramatically contrasted with the white garments. European artists adhered to the traditions through the early 13th century. Even in the north, they usually built a face up from a bluish or greenish modeling wash through varied tones of brown and pink to highlights and much brighter whites of the eyes. These effects can be seen in English works of the late 12th century. The Great Psalter from Canterbury, Paris, Bibliotheca Nationale, MS, late 8846, and the Bible in Winchester Cathedral Library provide good examples of this chromatic range in manuscript painting. Layered modeling is also seen in contemporary glass paintings in Canterbury Cathedral. The base color in this period was almost always a rosy pink glass containing manganese. It thus seems that for several centuries, in visual depictions, the white of the human eye was seen as truly white, whereas European flesh was variously seen to range across rich tones of pink to pinkish brown, contrastly strongly with the whites of human eyes. I'm gonna read that again. It says, it thus seems that for several centuries, in visual depictions, the white of the human eye was seen as truly white, whereas European flesh was variously seen to range across rich tones of pink and pinkish brown, contrasting strongly with the white of the human eyes. And the reason why I'm bringing this out is to show you how no one considered themselves white at that time. They knew that they were more like a pig, pink. Okay? It says, looking over an 11th century medical manuscript containing a commentary, Hippocrates, Calvinus sees that the nude figures are quite dark and evidently still owe much to an ancient Greek or Roman prototype. By contrast, in the 14th century medical manuscript from France showing a sequence of physician-patient interactions, all the faces and hands are opaque white and the hair very light. Two South Italian medical works from the 12th and 13th centuries also provide a contrast in the depiction of bare skin. The earlier artists still adhered to rich flesh tints, giving ruddy complexions and various black or brown hair. By the second half of the 13th century, this coloration had changed dramatically. In scenes of bathing in Peter of Eboli's tract on the curvature baths at Pozzuloi, the artist exposes pure white bodies and gold or red hair. These examples in medical manuscripts are of particular interest because there is no reason for them to be impacted by theological ideas that elided the good with light and purity. In fact, to be pallid was long recognized as a sign of ill health, as now in the phrase dead white. So this is the definition for pallid of a person's face, pale, typically because of poor health. Pale, white, pasty face, wan, colorless, anemic, bloodless, okay, peaky, peaked, whey face, ashen, ashy, chalky, gray, whitish, white face, faced, waxen, waxy, blanched, drained, pinched, green, ghastly, sickly, sallow, cadaverous, wow, lymphatic, okay, or feeble or insipid, okay. I'm gonna read this last sentence again. It says, these examples in medical manuscripts are of particular interest because there is no reason for them to be impacted by theological ideas that elided. All right, it says elide. To suppress or alter something such as a vowel or a syllable by elision. To strike out something such as a written word, to leave out of consideration, to omit. Okay? So it says, these examples in medical manuscripts are of particular interest because there is no reason for them to be impacted by theological ideas that elided the good with light and purity. In fact, to be pallid was long recognized as a sign of ill health, as now in the phrase dead white. So once again, as much as Esau tries to craft up deceit, the Lord always finds it out, okay? Because the Lord really created him to be the wicked, so he's expecting him to do these type of wicked deeds, okay? Which is associating his name with light and purity and calling himself white when he's really red. This is Proverbs 16 and Proverbs 6 and 14. Frowardness is in the heart. He deviseth mischief continually. He soweth discord. That's the whole point, or one of the many points of being a devil, okay? Is to sow discord, to cause confusion. And that's what Esau does. He causes confusion by claiming that he is white when in actuality he's red, okay? This is Isaiah 29 and 20. For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. You know, that's Esau's traditions. His tradition is to make, let me start at 20. For the terrible one is brought to naught, and the scorner is consumed, and all that watch for iniquity are cut off. Because really that's what Esau's model is, to create iniquity, to have people scorn, to have people mock, okay? To not have an upright conversation. Verse 21, that make a man an offender for a word, and lay a snare for him that reproveth in the gate, and turn aside the just for a thing of naught. And really that's what he does through witchcraft, you know? Let me continue. It says, but by the late Middle Ages, Calvinists shows us saints in paradise gleam as white as their garments, like a 14th century St. John from York Minster. But by the late Middle Ages, Calvinists shows us saints in paradise gleam as white as their garments, like a 14th century St. John from York Minster. A virginal saint might be celebrated with a pearly complexion and pure white garment. At some stage, Christians appropriated this sanctity by depicting their kind as truly white. Whiteness was also eventually equated with colorlessness. By then, it had become the norm for glass painters to use colorless glass instead of flesh tints. That is to say, by the late Middle Ages, in their visual art, Latin Christian Europeans not only came to depict their skin color as white, but made whiteness literally transparent, invisible. This is Proverbs 4:16. For they sleep not, except they have done mischief, and their sleep is taken away, lest they cause some to fall. This is Ezekiel 11:2. Then said he unto me, Son of man, these are the men that devise mischief, and give wicked counsel in the city, because them changing the color and them associating themselves with angels, okay, taking what was white and now associating themselves with it, but then not only that, but taking whiteness in itself completely out and making it invisible, are all divisive and all forms of mischief. It says, in order to pinpoint the shift to a preference for white people, Cavendish moves from a broad survey of medieval visual art to a linked set of localized examples from France in the region of Louis IX, the famed Crusader king. She calls attention to the fact that artists of the Psalter made for Ingeborg of Denmark, Louis's grandfather's queen, circa 1195, still modeled flesh in tones of pink and brown. 40 years later, Louis's mother, Blanche of Castile, who ruled during his minority, had much lighter colors painted in her Psalter. The glass Louis IX and Blanche had painted in the 1240s for the Palace Chapel in Paris, the famous Saint Chapelle, used colorless or barely tinted glass for the faces, and this became the norm. Louis' own Psalter followed suit about 1255, 1270. For an older generation of art historians, the predominant new complexion and facial type appeared to be no more significant than other stylistic changes, in accord with their notions of a Gothic era. I view it as a dramatic change in representational code with broad ramifications. This is Psalms 31. This is Psalms 36, verse 1. To the chief musician, a psalm of David, the servant of the Lord. The transgression of the wicked saith within my heart, that there is no fear of God before his eyes. For he flattereth himself in his own eyes, until his iniquity be found to be hateful. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. And that's exactly what you get. As it said here, I view it as a dramatic change in representational code with broad ramifications, meaning that now people are going to associate the terms white, pureness together. Whereas when you go back even into art and historical pictures, Edomites, so-called white people, were depicted as pink. Okay? Pink tones. Pink and almost hints of brown. Okay? Or even beige. But definitely not white. I'm going to read verse 3 again. This is Psalms 36:3. The words of his mouth are iniquity and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good. He deviseth mischief upon his bed. He setteth himself in a way that is not good. He abhorreth not evil. Because what you're doing is, as has been said, you're now putting yourself in the position of being viewed with some type of honor, with some type of dignity and respect. When in the, what did it say, the 1200s, the 1300s, was basically the change from when you were calling yourselves by your names, your land names, and then began to start to use paintings and art as a broad ramification of destroying people's minds to believe that you are quote unquote white. This is page 184. Okay, it says the visual art made for one family across 3 generations thus compactly allows Calvinists to localize to the second half of the 13th century Europeans' awareness of their skin tone as white, rather than pink, brown, creamy, or a medley of tints, and then see that whiteness of skin as transparent and as no color at all. So once again, the same point in which I just made, they became aware that their skin tone wasn't quote unquote white, but they knew that by associating their skin tone in depictions as white, people would view them in a better regard. It says, for Calvinists, the mid-13th century shift in artistic conventions, the dramatic change in representational code that results in Latin Christian European flesh being imagined and visualized as white and not flesh colored, was an artistic response built up from accumulated encounters with palpably non-whites. Okay? All right, the definition says here, palpable, capable of being touched or felt, easily perceptible by the mind. All right, it says, for Calvinists, the mid-13th century shift in artistic conventions, the dramatic change in representational code that results in Latin Christian European flesh being imagined and visualized as white and not flesh colored, was an artistic response built up from accumulated encounters with palpably non-white peoples. Basically, they started to realize that they were the ones that didn't have any quote-unquote skin tone. Okay? So they said, all right, well, cool. We'll just imagine and visualize ourselves as being white, and we'll put it up in pictures. Like many medievalists working in a variety of disciplines, Calvinists sees the 12th and 13th centuries as an expanded age of encounter. One reason that European Christians had come to regard themselves as white by 1250 may be that they had been coming in contact with large numbers with brown infidels and with sub-Saharan Africans. There are records of black so-called Ethiopians even in the north. And I think this is the last page. Until the advent of the formidable period of prolonged and forced mingling we know as the Crusades, The period of the first European expansion, as John Devisi puts it, Western Europe no longer had any contact with blacks. All that was known about them was an abstraction, blackness itself. If Cavendish is correct, it seems such absence of substantive contact with black-skinned people did not lead Western Europeans to contemplate their own whiteness, nor to depict their own flesh tones as white. Scholars such as Devisi suggest that the relative absence of black-skinned people instead freed the European imagination to conjure with the meaning of blackness. Leaving aside for now the enigma of whiteness, we thus turn to the more traditional focus in discussions of epidermal race, blackness in the centuries before the age of expanded encounter. So yeah, I just wanted to add that as well. Clearly, as you can tell, Esau, the so-called white man, has always been on a mission of destroying our lineage with the Lord. And one of his tricks is by using wordage. Certain words have power, or really all words have power, but especially when you confuse the masses of people to believe that you are white and that someone else is black. And none of those terms are used biblically to associate people from a nation. So I'm going to end off here. This is Hosea chapter 7. And I'm going to start at verse 6. It says, "For they have made ready their heart like an oven, whilst they lie in wait. Their baker sleepeth all night. In the morning it burneth as a flame of fire." Okay. So yeah, I mean, like, majority of these people, their heart is like an oven, man. All they want to do is try to destroy the name of Israel from off of the planet. By doing so, by changing how people treat us, how people talk to us, speak to us, all of that is a form of having some type of slavery of the people. Because now Esau doesn't have to have eyes on you 24/7. Everyone that you come in contact with has that program within them to look at you as being void of light, being black. This is Job 24, and I'll start at verse 9. This is Job 24:9. "They pluck the fatherless from the breast and take a pledge of the poor. They cause him to go naked without clothing. And they take away the sheaf from the hungry, which make oil within their walls, and tread their wine presses, and suffer thirst. Men groan from out of the city, and the soul of the wounded cried out. Yet Yahweh layeth not folly to them. They are of those that rebel against the light. They know not the ways thereof, nor abide in the paths thereof. The murderer rising with the light killeth the poor and needy, and in the night is as a thief." And that's exactly what Esau is doing. He's taken our identity and remixed it and applied it to the general public. as a form of witchcraft and sorcery, to have them confused, to have them concerned about black people and how to treat white people, when all of those terms are created, especially for Esau's system, to keep him in a position of authority. So, hopefully, this lesson was edifying for the elect. Once again, I'd like to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, by Hashem, Yahweh Shai, by Hashem, Harakah Kodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone who teach and rule well, and peace and salutation to the elect. Shalom.